sounds agreeable.
Yep.
Um, I'm not quite sure who's planning to join, but we have a good core group here. If people join, they can add their comments at that time. The starting point for this, I think, would be just for us to share our big picture thoughts about the vision. It is a sort of a big picture vision, right? It's like about sort of on a high level with strategies. So I thought maybe we could just go through members and everyone would share what their big picture thoughts are and what might be added, what's missing. Does that sound right? Otherwise, we could just walk through the document, but I'm tending to think that because the way the vision is stated, it's less likely to be something that we're going to be saying, oh, on this line, add that, but more like we might want to add some big picture thoughts of our own or make sort of some big picture comments. What are people's thoughts about how to proceed?
Wendy, before we do that, I think we have to do a roll call since this is
sorry, yeah.
meeting.
If you could run through that, that'd be great.
Sure. All right, so Amanda Sullivan Astor.
Present by video.
David Budney.
Present by video.
Eric Kranzish.
Present by video.
Gary Jensen. Len Ahrens. Julie Woodward.
Present.
Kayla Swanson. Kate McMichael. She's here. I'm not sure. Maybe she's having some issues with her stuff. Maurizio Valerio.
Present by video.
Rick Zen.
Present.
And Wendy Gerlach.
Present by video.
And then Ben Doimling is also present by video.
Are we announcing ourselves?
I think we're good.
Do we have any other members of the public or others who'd like to introduce themselves? I got a message. Can others see that Kate's trying to get on, but can't get in?
Maybe it's working there.
We can hear you, Kate.
Good. Oh, great. Okay.
Okay.
I realized I was thinking of the agenda as being very simple and we just jump into discussion. Is there something I'm missing there or should we do that? I don't have the agenda right in front of me now.
No, I think other than just making sure we do the roll call, it was pretty much just going into the comments.
Yeah. So I had proposed before everyone jumped on that we just, because it's a very big picture document, that we just go through the various members and have people share what their big picture thoughts are, and then we'll get a sense of what people are thinking. And if there's some points that we say, yes, we want to bring those together into a comment document, we will do so. Sound okay? See any nods there? Okay.
Wendy, could I just say a couple words of my thoughts?
I'd love it. Yeah,
heading
please.
into this. This is Ben Doimling, and so I mostly just wanted to listen. I've really appreciated all the time we have already spent on this document, and hopefully some of those conversations have made their way into this. We're a little bit at the 11th hour. This public comment period came quite late. So yeah, but I think whatever you as a committee come up with would be great to forward on to Joy, would be the sort of right process. I will be listening and taking notes here as well. And I will do my best to try to see if we can shoehorn any more of these comments into the document before we approve it in the first week of June. Also, just from sort of clarifying, there's sort of two parts to this document. There's what I'm going to call the vision, which is really the sort of purpose, context, and goals. And then there's a series of strategies listed under those goals. The strategies are definitely incomplete. Those are not really, there's going to be a lot more work in the second half of the year on the strategies and then tactics and the implementation of this vision document. So what we're ratifying in June is primarily the purpose, context, and goals. And I just want to make sure people don't get too hung up on strategies because there's a lot of work to do there still. The strategies that are listed here are a smattering of strategies that try to hit a lot of them, but are definitely not comprehensive. So, yeah, anyway, hopefully that was helpful. Just wanted to add a little context.
I think that was very helpful. So thank you. And with that, I will think open it up to people to talk. So I'm seeing Dave, and I'll just, if you could share your thoughts, go ahead.
Sure. I think, I don't know, would it help to share the document, or you just want to have us spout our thoughts without seeing it on the screen, or what's the plan there?
You know, I have the document up myself, so, but if others would like to have it up on the screen shared, we could do that. It's kind of easier to see people if we don't have the document up.
That's fine. So when I look at it, I think there's two main things that kind of I was thinking about, and you know, being private forest landowners, you know, a lot of this, like you say, is pretty high level and you know, applies to a broad cross section of the state. But then when we get down to page 8 and 9, which is resilient communities, I think that's where I spent you know, was thinking more deeply about that section, and I think you've got a placeholder there for environmental justice strategies. So that's really something that needs to be tackled by more than just us. But then you know, I think for resilience, I actually, the first time I read it, I missed the last bullet point, which is a carryover on page 9. But when I think of resilient communities, I think of resilience to natural disturbance, particularly wildfire. And so I see that you've got that there. And but I think that's probably you know, to me, that's a big deal. I mean, you know, I know you haven't ranked these things, but like I say, I kind of missed that the first time I read it. But I think we should spend some time talking about that, and so that was my main point regarding the document itself. But then the second thing is that it has been pointed out well there. You know, I think having been involved in a lot of these things in the past, you know, it's always great to write visions and goals and all that stuff, but then oftentimes these things sit on people's desks or in their bookshelves. But if there was a way to take these strategies, and you know, this is where I think we could really be of more benefit, is to assign tasks, you know, to accomplish those strategies, so that what is it that family forest landowners can do, small forest landowners can do to implement the goals through strategies within a particular time frame, you know, so that there's a lot of things that are in this document that we could help with, you know, whether it's publicity or just, you know, education of better practices, that sort of thing. So anyway, I think those are the two things I was thinking about, was to the resilient communities, focus on that, but then also at the appropriate time help with the strategies and how to get assigned tasks and timeframes and all, so we can actually monitor and track how we can achieve some of these things. That's my comments.
Thank you. Kate?
So one of the things I want, actually, and Ben, maybe I will send these off to you, because I actually spent a fair amount of time. There's a really dangerous thing when you ask someone with 2 degrees in English and who spent time as a teacher grading a lot of writing, that it's really hard not to also grade the comment on the document. Just because I can't help myself, I apologize. But sort of that said, so I have a lot of comments all the way through that I'm not going to share in this meeting. But a couple of things did really strike me. One, by the time I got to the end and saw the appendix where it's like, who is the Board of Forestry and who is Oregon, you know, who are we section? I actually wonder if that should be more a preface than an appendix, because it contextualizes some of the other comments you make all the way along in a way that isn't as clear if you don't already know some of those things. And depending on who this, if you're hoping for this document to be broad and that's something that people will read that haven't been in the loop, that you need to do everything you can to get them in the loop. I used to say this to my students all the time. Readers don't know what's in your mind. They only know what's on the page. And there are a number of places throughout that, because we've had these meetings, I've listened to some of the when there've been the meetings that you guys have had working on this, I've listened to some of those. So I know so much more is in what you've been thinking than has always made it to the page. So sometimes it feels redundant to keep repeating things, but some of those things are not as readily apparent to people who don't know them. For example, this is a wonderful vision for all of Oregon's forests, but ODF and the Board of Forestry only has kind of a say in state forests and private forests, not the management of federal forests. And I think there's a huge, based on just work I've done tabling at events and stuff, there is a huge lack of understanding of that in the general public at large. And it doesn't have to be a huge thing, but making some of those things clear, and that it's about, that's where those partnerships come in. None of that emerges till the very end of the document, and only because I was really looking for it. So I think, yeah, I'm not going to belabor that. So if you needed help proofreading at the end, there are some inconsistencies of things that I would happily help with.
And yeah, please send those proofreading edits on to Joy. That would be very helpful.
And do we have, what address? Do I have maybe you could throw the email address in the chat. That would be really helpful.
Well, just Helen send them to me tonight.
Or just send them to Heather too, Kate.
Perfect.
And Heather will go together.
Okay.
Or everybody else too.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Eric? Oh, sorry, Mauricio put his hand up. Did you want to say something, Mauricio?
Yeah, but let Eric go first.
Okay.
Nope, I'm good. Maurizio's ahead of me.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll be brief. Very well written document. Clearly, many hours have gone into making it extensive, almost a bulletproof language. I have a few things to point out. Many times, the words rural, suburban, and urban have been used in the same sentence, implying a same burden on these three chunks of descriptive inhabitants. While in reality, the vision, some way, somehow, should convey that the burden on forestry has been historically and is currently tilted or more substantial on the rural populations. Some recent fires have touched, but in general, though, even decision chasing and lifestyles are tilted more toward a rural burden and rural advantages, for that matter. One general thought. The second one was about, especially in one paragraph, and one of the areas, the resilient communities. And also the word place-based has been used many times as part of this vision. One point that I made is place-based is great. However, at the end of the day, it also requires very specific in the strategies, very specific mention on how the decision-making process is going to be conducted. I have a very dear to my heart example in 2017, so now is almost 8 years ago. 7 years ago. I started working with a group was called the Place-Based Water Planning. 4 piloting communities in Oregon, Harney County, Union County, one on the coast and the John Day River Territory, Newport. And for 7 years, many communities have gone through tens of thousands of hours of public input on decision-making practices that pertain to water planning with the state agencies. What it boils down to it at the end of it is there was a big fear in the beginning that decision-making power still remains strongly in the hands of, so the process of inclusion was there, but the process of inclusion in the decision-making did not translate at the end of it for some of these communities. So place-based is only as good as we really practice the inclusion, not in the room as we talk about it, but later on as decisions are made at the end of processes. Those are my 3 general comments. I appreciate the language in the document is clearly extensive, and I am nitpicking through it. And I need to say, in general, it's great that we're working on a vision like this. So thank you. And thank you, Ben, for being here again. And everybody else. Ben is not the best looking one of all, but we always mention him because it's so. Anyway, thank you, Ben.
Thank you. We will now jump to Eric.
Thank you. I won't make any comments about, whether Ben's the best looking one or not. So I'll stay away from that one. But wanted to point out, I guess my concern overall, I'm hung up on the first paragraph of the entire document. I don't like the idea that we're starting out a vision for Oregon's forest, claiming that our forests are in overall decline, and that's due in large part to, in essence, a component of that being historic forest management. I see 3.7 million acres in Oregon that are SFI certified, 200,000 acres that are FSC certified, and then all of our small woodland owners who are ATF certified beyond that. Those landowners are very much, I'm making great strides to address the changes that we're seeing in our forests. But to say that their lands are in overall decline, I think that's a very cruel thing to say to landowners who are very committed to growing forests very healthy across Oregon. Especially our small woodland owners who are, day to day on their property, making almost tree level decisions for the betterment of their property. If it were my choice, I would just cut the entire first paragraph out of the document. I don't think it has any place and sets a bad tone for where we're at in Oregon. With that being said, it also feels like Oregon Department of Forestry, with its aspirations for greatest permanent value on its lands, but also has also tried to balance that social, environmental, and economic perspective. In this document, it feels like the economic side is completely missing. And what's in there is almost a forced notion that was brought in by Joe and Carla in previous board meetings. There's a lot of social, there's a lot of environment, but I think one of the things we're seeing across the West, when you look at especially states like Montana, where now they're in a restoration role on a lot of their lands, they don't have any manufacturing facilities or an economic system that can support those efforts. And so it seems to me that what's in here is almost our manufacturing conversations and our economics are basically in here by force, as opposed to being an equal balance of social and environment.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks, Eric. Rick?
Oh, great. Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
I agree with everything that folks have said so far, and I think I've got 6 comments. And Mauricio mentioned the place-based approach, and that really resonates with our members. And that idea that we're making the best choices for the spot and the situation, that's big. But as an old educator, we used to use this about education and outdoor education. And I think the document really needs to define what that means and what scale. Because it's like, is Oregon a place? And so that idea that you could telescope large and small to get the place-based solution. But in the worst case scenario, this is a feel good, and really we need some definition what that is. I like that idea of place-based, but what's the place and what's it based on? So thanks, Mauricio, for calling that out. And it's not just an east or west side thing. The second thing on page 21, toward the end in that appendix areas or whatever they are, the Forest Resources Division has urban forestry and has nothing about SFOs. And so private lands and FSOs should be called out. It's an important component of the agency history and where we want to go in the future. And so that we need to be included in there.
Rick, can you say again the part of the document where you said you particularly wanted to see that?
Oh, page 21, it breaks out what the department does, and it has the Forest Resources Division, and doesn't really have anything about SFOs. It has urban forestry, which is great, but I think it should have SFOs in there and private lands. The third one is, again, sort of overall, is the value of private lands. And this, I think, is echoing Eric's comments. There are people that we run into all the time that don't know that there's private forest land, and they certainly don't know that it's owned by small forest owners that may or may not live on the property and are responsible for that attractive, useful, valuable forest. And on page 3, on that first page, this is one of the few places I could find it, and it's called Forest Products Infrastructure. And I think that's us. That's us. But that's not, I can't think of any small forest owner that would call themselves primarily Forest Products Infrastructure. And so, again, that was an opportunity in the first part of the document to kind of ease out this, the value of this very large number of stewards of the state's forest. On the social, economic, and environmental, I get that. But the economic component is really lacking in this document, as Eric said, and it's a significant contribution. The economic contribution of SFOs are important. Not only are they paying taxes, they may or may not be harvesting, but they're improving habitat, water quality, all kinds of things. And so the role of SFOs in the economic piece of this document is just kind of missing. It's just missing. Even if you don't, there's not even factor in the real estate. And so again, I go back to that kind of loss or conversion. If we don't value it, we may not see it coming. And then I'm glad Eric said about the first paragraph. It's dark, decline, and I don't think that's a great way to start a vision statement. And I don't know what the answer is, but I could live without that first paragraph, or without that as the first paragraph. It's just reinforces that we're going down the tubes, and that's the plan. Nothing we could do about it. And I think the plan is the opposite. So thanks, Eric, for bringing that up. And again, loss and conversion of private forest land, the small private forest land, is a big thing. And then the last one, number 6, is the financial model of how this all works. It's complex, and we're just struggling with this wildfire funding issue and who pays for it. And so I wish the document had a section on the funding model for the department. How is that going to change over time? Are we going to do less of this and more of this? Are we going to be more dependent on the general fund? Are we going to, where is this going to come from? So a plan without the economic model behind it, how you're going to do this, I don't think it's a very good plan. The rest of the stuff, it's like, great, who wouldn't want these things? But how we pay for it, and we know that the demands are only going to increase. And how is the department going to, what's the vision for the department on that? So I wish this document were a little more proactive. And maybe that first paragraph, department budgets are overall in decline, or something like that. So that's kind of my take on it. And sorry for rambling.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. Let's see, Amanda.
Hey guys, I've been kind of coming in and out, as Heather has probably noticed, whoever's administering the Zoom. So I'm gonna not go on video because that seems to be the problem. So as long as you guys can hear me, I can get a thumbs up. Okay, great. I will just go like this. So I apologize that I'm not on video. Yeah, I mean, I definitely have a lot of comments. I think as many have already stated, there's kind of a lot to go through here. But I think one of the things that I notice, maybe this is perhaps a nerdy point, Ben, but there is technically a difference between resilience and adaptation when it comes to climate change. And we tend to focus on resiliency throughout this document. And the definition of forest resilience is the ability to respond to and recover from disturbances and changing conditions, whereas forest adaptation is the ability to change or mitigate or migrate in response to disturbances and changing conditions. So from a technical perspective, there is a difference between, when we talk about forest resiliency or resiliency in general, and then the adaptive capacity of forests. So I don't think it's bad that we talk about both, but we just might want to be consistent in our language and what we're trying to address, because the strategies associated with resiliency versus adaptation are in fact different. And so anyways, just something that I wanted to know, just as something that I was reviewing throughout this. And in the goals for the resilient forest, the last sentence says the Department of Forestry has the tools to incentivize and support this work. I don't know if that should be worded differently to assess that is a goal, or if it's hard to know if that's a statement, because if it's a statement of fact, I'm not necessarily sure that I agree. If it's a goal that we're striving to achieve, then maybe rewording it as such would be better. So anyways, I just don't want to be, I don't want the department to get into a situation where we're basically telling the legislature, we have everything we need, we don't need anything else, because I don't think that that's the situation we find ourselves in. And sort of to that end, under the strategies, there's one of the strategies under resilient forests that talks about engaging with the governor's office and legislature on potential incentives. And I would maybe put before that landowners to identify what those incentive structures should be, and then working with the governor's office and the legislature to move those over the finish line. Just thinking about where this group's at and the involvement that the CFF has had with the small landowner grant program, and trying to create incentives and create structures that work for them, rather than simply going to the legislature. I would rather see kind of that lean on landowners, and operators, obviously, I represent operators, but leaning on them first. So
can you say again where the specific spot you are thinking that could be put in?
So that's under the strategies. I think it's the 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, the third bullet point under strategies for resilient forest lands or forests.
What page?
Page 6.
Thanks.
Yeah, so it's right now it just says engage with the governor's office and legislature.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I would say engage landowners, and then maybe further along in that sentence, working with the governor's office and legislature to, you know, move those things over the finish line. But they're not necessarily the experts on what those incentives should be. I saw Eric's hand came up, so I'll defer to him if he's got a comment before I keep going.
Go ahead, Eric.
I have a different topic. If you had, Amanda, if you had other stuff, please feel free. I can come back at a later time.
Okay. Yeah, I have a few more things. I think the majority of them fall under the wildfire section. And I really appreciate, Ben, the work that you guys have done to take in comments from this group and others on, you know, updating the title and picking out some of the more controversial language in here and aligning more with the different divisions and roles within fire across the department. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. I think that this section has come a long way in a very short time, and that is no small task. So wanted to start with that. In addition on this, one thing I wanted to highlight was perhaps the inclusion somewhere around partnering with the Oregon Prescribed Fire Council. So ODF sits on the Prescribed Fire Council in multiple capacities, but it's a pretty critical entity to be engaging on as it relates to mitigation, prescribed fire, and you know, there's a lot of discussion in that group around how do we, you know, move the needle and reduce barriers. So I think it would be appropriate as a call out within that section under the strategies as a key partner.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'll probably leave it there. And we can maybe move back over to Eric unless there were questions on any of those items.
I jumped to Eric, but noting that we haven't heard from Julie yet.
Yeah, I can wait till Julie, by all means.
All right, Julie, since you haven't had the mic yet, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Again, echoing a lot of the time and commitment that has gone into the document. I just wanted to note two things that I haven't heard from the group yet. One of the goals of the Committee for Family Forest Land has always been about infrastructure and especially east side infrastructure. And there's a, excuse me, a small paragraph on page 3 about infrastructure, but I don't see anything reflected in any of the strategies related to infrastructure. And so just thinking about, you know, if perhaps that's been missed, or if there's an opportunity for the board to think about some strategies for actual practice to come into play around infrastructure. And then my other comment on, for example, page 6, there's sometimes reference about rules for incentives. And we have seen a lot of research that for landowners, more rules don't incentivize them. And so I would be cautious about using those terms together. We have incentive programs and we have rule programs, and we don't often find that rules lead to incentives. And so I would just put that out there to think about. And also as a strategy that you're going to develop rules to incentivize landowners, you know, the board has a very much a process, and now with adaptive, you know, to look at the rules and to go through that process, and to say that you're changing the rules for that, it seems like it's a little bit ahead of the full process that the board takes when they look at rules and if those need to be changed. And then I agree about the historic forest management decisions. That terminology that's used a few times is really confusing for Oregonians. Some Oregonians think back to the 50s and 60s before we had rules, and others might be thinking of yesterday. And so that really, historic forest management decisions is a term that Again, it doesn't put the exact vision that you might be wanting to put into people's head. So I think just as some of these terms that I would caution thinking about how we're relating those to the public. So thanks for the opportunity today and appreciate all the work that's gone into this.
Thanks, Julie. Eric?
Yeah, thank you. I forgot to mention in my comments, one of the things I've mentioned to Ben a couple of times and wanted to keep reiterating is I'm a little concerned about the idea of balancing a climate smart forestry with carbon plan, with our wildfire program and our resilient forests. Those toe a really tight line in Oregon. If we're going to go down the road of a climate smart forestry program that has a carbon plan associated with it, I'm assuming similar to Washington and California, that looks at a carbon market. And the challenge there is that if we're going to incentivize people to add more biomass to the landscape, that creates a challenge with regard to our resilient forests. Especially when you consider that some of our least productive lands in Oregon are in extremely high wildfire prone areas, and to incentivize landowners then to maximize the biomass that goes on their forest lands for financial compensation, which is greater than what they could be making by managing their forests for other uses. That's going to directly challenge our wildfire program, and I'm really concerned that tying those three together through the department with objectives is going to make a very tough rulemaking process as all three of those come to a head.
Eric, sorry for this question, but I don't know quite what you mean by biomass. When you say adding biomass, are you saying encouraging reforestation of marginal areas so there's more fuel loads? I just didn't get what you meant quite.
Well, if we're gonna create a program that potentially could create a carbon market, that carbon market could look like all kinds of different things to a landowner. But in reality, what that does is encourage more growing material on the landscape beyond what they're doing. So, for example, if we were to look at an example where under current management, you establish a baseline and then you're incentivized to grow more biomass in terms of trees, anything carbon based beyond that level that you would then sell a carbon contract for, that puts more risk on the landscape, in my opinion, and directly challenges our goal of some resilient forests. As what a landowner may choose to do is collect the financial compensation for maximizing carbon on the landscape, as opposed to growing healthy, resilient forests in the face of climate and other challenges before them. And that directly then, maximizing carbon on the landscape, as opposed to doing so in a resilient manner, then challenges our wildfire protection system, especially in the southern half of the state.
Thanks for clarifying. I see Amanda's hand up. Amanda?
Yeah, Julie reminded me of something. Before I get into that, I just wanted to ask Ben, I see under the new version, under the shared values, I know there was some discussion during the board meeting around the people-centric versus like forest-centric, so that got removed. But under the ones that were previously people-centric, that I think the intent of those is that they're ODF-centric, actually, more than just people-centric. But it uses words like our workforce is our greatest asset. And it might be good if the intent there is really ODF talking to ODF, that be changed to ODF's workforce is our greatest asset, or the workforce at ODF is like something to align that better, because as an outsider, as a stakeholder, I read that and totally agree. Our workforce is our greatest asset because I represent folks in the workforce, but I don't think that's the intent. So there might need to be some adjustment there to meet the intent of the board and the kind of the leadership team, the executive leadership team at large at ODF. But kind of getting back to Julie's point around, there doesn't seem to be many strategies around, some of those pieces to tie into that shared value that got added around forestry infrastructure. One thing that that I had highlighted in my kind of comments that I've been pulling together is around especially the wildfire, the addressing the wildfire crisis, but could be relevant to the resilient forests as well, is something around maintaining a vibrant forest workforce, including loggers, road builders, forest operators. You could expand that to the milling infrastructure as well, to ensure mitigation efforts can be achieved and the complete and coordinated system can continue to function with its in-kind benefits to Oregonians. So thinking about that tie-in to the complete and coordinated system, and that if we don't maintain those workforces, it's not just forest health for the sake of forest health that might be compromised, but it's our wildfire fighting apparatus as well that I think Oregonians at large don't quite understand.
Thanks, Amanda. I think I've been trying to call on everyone in the room, and I haven't called on myself yet, and I think I'm next, based on who I see on the screen. So I'll go ahead. Thanks for everyone's thoughtful comments, which of course have triggered thoughts in my mind, but I have my own little list, so I'll run through that. I agree with the comments that have been made. It would be nice to have more economic and funding detail, because even if this is vision, I appreciate all the work on the vision and what the priorities and goals are, but I like a document that links a little bit at least into what's feasible and what sources of funding will be, what's realistic. For me, it would have made sense to me that the document would have mentioned the private forest accord, because that's a really major undertaking now in Oregon forests. And so I think there must have been a purposeful decision not to include the private forest accord. But even if you leave the vision as it is, I really think that that is going to be a key part of the strategies as those are added, because that's something that basically has been agreed on and is starting to be implemented. It will be a key part now and in future years in terms of coming up with strategies, practices, and incentives that are consistent with all the work that's already been done. So I would like to see references to how that can be work that's already been done that will promote this vision that you've developed. I had workforce, but that's been talked about plenty already. Let's see. I thought that there could have been more mention about small forest landowners really throughout in this document. My mind also stuck on the resilient communities language, which was a place where I was expecting there to be references to small forest landowners and their role in stewardship for many different benefits, including public benefits and their private economic benefits. So I would have liked to see more of the role of small forest landowners in the avoiding conversion, and the fact that incentive programs for small forest landowners, given the fact that they're in the WI, they're often in riparian areas, that's really a critical way to get to support the values in this document and do it in a way that links to communities. And other people talked a lot about that, but in particular, the SFOs, the role that they play in stewardship and avoiding conversion. I just like to see that a little more visible when we're talking about communities. That we're part of the community. And then I had noted resilience. I think others have talked well about resilience, being a little more specific about what that's going to mean on the ground. And I know that this is a vision document, but I would like to see that added a bit beefed up in some of the strategies that are currently there. And then, yeah, I guess that my final comment would be I accept that this is a visionary document. I was expecting it to get a little deeper into the implementation part, and I really look forward to seeing what the next step is in terms of fleshing those out and coming out with some practical and more economic and funding related, feasibility type next steps. I thought it might be helpful. If someone hasn't had a chance to speak, I think I can see the whole group. Put your hand up, but it might be interesting to bounce back to Ben and hear some of his thoughts on what we've said. Does that sound okay to you, Ben?
Sure thing. Yeah, thank you. I've been taking a ton of notes, and a couple points on the so there was, first of all, this is a clunky process, and this is coming very late, this feedback, And we actually had one last subcommittee meeting since this particular document was typed up. And luckily, I think we addressed at least some of the things that you guys have been pointing out in that last subcommittee meeting. So the wording and layout of the first 3 paragraphs was changed and updated. That we worked on that. We also worked on our shared values and tried to bring in a lot more. Tried to bring in a little bit more language, at least around the economic values of the forest. There's a little bit of work that has already gotten done that I think addresses some of these things. I have a ton of notes here, and that's all really valuable. I don't really disagree with much of what has been said here, and I think there's a lot of little things that still can be done. From a process perspective, I would like to think that maybe we could shoehorn a couple of these changes into the document in time for the June approval. It's really important to me that the June deadline is really to meet the governor's requirement to each department needs to have a strategic plan and submit it by the end of the fiscal year. And so that's the deadline we're meeting there. There's nothing to say that the board can't keep working on this. And given the feedback here, and I'm sure there's other feedback going to be coming in from other groups and people, I would like to find some time for the board to keep working on this a little bit more to get it. I feel like we're at maybe 80, 85%, and we could go at least another 10% to get it to 95%. That's a little bit how I see the process. I don't set the agenda for the meetings. Hopefully we can find a little bit more time to keep working on this though. And then we'll continue to work on the strategies at length. But, and I don't know that I need to really go into detail on all the specific points, but except to say that well spoken and they're well taken.
Thanks, Ben. Again, we're very appreciative of all the work. And so I think whenever you come up with do all the hard work on this, like I can't imagine it's really great. Like, oh no, we're going to pick pieces in it. But in general, I think our main comment is we appreciate all the hard work you've done and just happen to see points that we would like to be added or fleshed out. Other members of the committee want to add any more comments or thoughts? And process-wise, we would think about for the committee, what's our next step? But I thought I'd open it up just for general comments. If you have suggestions about what to do next, please say so. Since I'm not hearing from anyone else, Ben, do you think that it would be realistic that if this committee could manage to put together some sort of synopsis of the comments that have been made just verbally now, that would be helpful? That might not be, that would be something probably require some staff support in pulling that together. I don't know if Mike and Heather and Miriam feel that's realistic, but I also am curious, Ben, whether you think that's something that would be helpful beyond your just hearing our verbal comments.
Oh, very much so. And I think whatever you guys can put together to summarize these comments and send to Joy, they can be put into the public record. They can be then distributed to all the board members. That would be very valuable. So please, whatever capacity you have for that, that would be great, because otherwise it's just me and saying what I keep saying in these committee meetings.
Keep looking at Heather and Merms. See.
We'll figure it out.
They'll figure it out, Wendy.
So do we need to make an official statement to the board? Wendy, do we need to make a formal statement to the board?
Like if you're asking about how this committee would put together something, I would think that under our charter, say we can put together, agree upon a 1 to 2 pager where we just sort of consolidate comments that are made. I'm sure that we would have some back and forth because we probably don't 100% agree on the priority of those statements. But in the time I've been chair, this committee has not put forward a 1 to 2 pager with commentary, but I think that's something we could do. But I don't really know in terms of you're saying, Rick, like what's exactly the procedure for getting it in front of the board? I'm not all that sure what the precise answer is there.
So this is currently out for public comment, this document, and I think that closes at the end of this week, I think. And I think Joy is managing that process, and it will then be added into the record with all the other public comments that will be shown to given to the board. So
21st or 31st?
I'm not sure. It's a fairly narrow window on the public comment, and to add the CFF's voice to that public comment process would be very valuable.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Julie, did you want to say something?
Well, it seems one feasible way would be if, not to put it back on Heather, but if essentially we always have meeting minutes, and if we could, as a group, you can say the committee met, things were brought forward, this was, and just essentially pass along our minutes from the meeting with a brief summary from the group, of the things I think that obviously we're in consensus about, perhaps small forest land owners, being more prominent, and about things related to our charter, and then attach minutes for more details. That may be just enough to help bring it to the attention without, Wendy, as you're saying, statements that everybody has to agree and vote on each statement, but it would allow them to see that the group met, what people said generally, and then, if there's one or two things you wanted to take forward to highlight, such as including SFOs, that might be a way to approach it.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure whether in putting comments together, I mean, there are the voting members of the committee, and then also the, I think, what are the others, the additional members of the committee. I'm not completely certain about, like, when you finalize an official 1 or 2 pager, I think it's just the voting members that would finalize that. Of course, we can include, as we wish, the helpful comments made by everyone together. The minute approach would just be more inclusive and not have any weighting of comments or statement of where they're from. Do people have comments on whether they like to do an edited 1 to 2 pager or just provide minutes with a summary? The summary of the minutes would be kind of important because it would be almost like a 1 to 2 pager. My thought might be maybe I could work with Heather and putting together some of the comments that I feel have been reiterated, and she seemed to be a fair amount of commonality, and then say these are some of the big picture, because I've heard a lot of overlapping comments, and then say these additional comments were made. So sort of a category of, broadly made comments that were touched on by a lot of people, and then some additional comments that sort of summarizes the discussion more.
I keep looking.
I'm okay with that, as long as you're keep in mind your due date for your board packet when it has to be submitted by.
It's this Friday.
It is this
We would
Friday.
have to get it done by Friday, right? So I don't know if what your capacity, I could work on it with you, Heather, in the next 2 days, and we could send it out and hope people can respond right away. It's a very short timeline.
Yeah, well,
or maybe it's Murmur
doing
it. Sorry, I didn't want to suppose who in the department would be doing what. I'm sort of referring to Heather, but maybe it'd be someone else who would be doing it. Because Miriam, I think you were there. I just can't quite see the room.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm here.
Wendy, we can chat about it and go from
Okay.
there.
Okay. And then, so we could, since we have, each of us has made comments, Heather and Merman and I have kept track of them. We can try and make a consolidated sort of version of what the comments were and send them around to this committee to take a look at and comment on, and then aim to get it in the public comment period by the end of the week. Does that sound like a next step? Okay. I think
Yep.
people are okay. And that would mean, I don't know if we need to spend more time on this meeting right now. We could call it closed now. I don't see, oh, I do see Glenn's just arriving, but hi, Glenn. We were just coming up with a proposal for summarizing the comments that we just heard from. We went through everybody and talked about the vision, summarizing that, and then sending it around to committee members to get their final thoughts and try and submit those thoughts by Friday, which is the end of the public comment period. But I see you have just jumped on, so I will turn. Do you have stuff you would like to add or comment or say?
Well, I kind of feel out of the loop not having heard everything else before. So
of course,
it might be better not to prolong this, but to just give me a shot at what I see distilled, what you just said, from the rest of the committee, and just see if I have anything to add or improve from my perspective.
Okay. I think we'll do that. Thanks, Glenn. That's understanding of you. And I see Mauricio and some others have to jump off, right? Because I think most people have to jump off right now. So we will work on it. Thank you, everyone. And thanks especially, Ben, for being here to support us for all your work on the board.
Thanks for all your fantastic comments.
Oh, Dave.
Just quickly, I might have been confused on this whole thing, but being relatively new to the committee and not.
Sorry, you cut out, Dave. You went on mute.
In the email that we got, it's, you know, there was a with the plan, and when you bring up the plan, there was the highlighted text in yellow. It said flag for subcommittee work in May. So that's where I spent my time. Now, if we were to review the whole report, which I was happy to do, I probably would have echoed most of what was said here already. I mean, the biggest thing that after looking at the beginning, maybe just not to belabor this, but in looking at the beginning, I think what I would have started off with was that Oregon's forests, you know, are owned by a variety of entities, and really that's not really brought out in the document. Eric did a good job, and Amanda did a good job of highlighting that. But I really think that you know, SFOs do deserve a more upfront presentation in this document that isn't really brought out at all. And so I think, you know, that was one thing that I want to say. But and Wendy, if you want, I can certainly spend the time and go through the whole thing beyond just the yellow highlighted portion, but I think I probably wouldn't come up with anything more than what's already been said.
From my perspective, that would be fine. And also, Glenn, if you had any comments that you wanted to, I think we had more time on this meeting. It was just looking to me like lots of people had to jump off. But if you, Dave, wanted to send some more thoughts to Heather and Merm, and then they could share those with me. And similarly, Glenn, if you had some sort of comments you wanted to share, because we're working on it today and tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah, I just felt like if you guys already spent an hour going around, that I didn't want to necessarily reinvent it. But I guess I would echo what David said, is that's what struck me, is that we didn't really highlight the important character of the different ownerships, and particularly, of course, for this committee, the small forest landowners, and the unique role that they play, and the very important role, especially being closer to where other people live compared to the larger landowners. So that would be something that, you know, echoing what Dave said, really. Yeah, and it sounds like though you'll get something out to all of us, and if we want to add anything more by the end of the week, we have a chance. And then seeing what everybody else has already put in there.
Rick?
Yeah, thanks. I just kind of a process thing. We all review a lot of plans and documents, and it's kind of unusual that you've got the public comment period Friday, and we're the designated advisory committee, and we're getting to this on Monday before, and the subcommittee was still making changes last week. And so this is not, and I know it's an iterative process with the board, and that's great. I attended a number of meetings that important things were hashed out, but it's like, so what is the final document that we're supposed to review and comment on? So this is not, doesn't feel very good. And I understand, you know, the need to meet the governor's deadline and have a plan. But even just for this committee to do its work of kind of surfacing and reading and, you know, what is, do we even have the final document? So I just want to register some concerns about this and then reiterate what we said all along. I don't believe that the SFO's contribution to the health and well-being of the state is really called out enough in here. You really have to read between the lines to see it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Rick. Dave?
There. Now, again, you know, coming in relatively fresh compared to all the rest of you more experienced folks on the history of this whole thing. But when I've been involved in situations like this, as Rick has just outlined, you know, and I don't know the rules, but would it be possible for us to submit, I don't want to call it a minority report, but like an appendix of additional suggestions or information or whatever you want to call it, that basically allows us to more fully explain some of these points that may not be able to be getting into meeting your timeline. Does that make sense? So that we could create something that goes beyond what you're thinking about, Wendy. I'd be happy to help out on this because I think it's important. You know, the more I'm thinking about what everybody's been talking about here, that we more fully explain, because it's not presented in this document that way. And so I think that would maybe be to the benefit of everybody to have it as an appendix if it can't be included at this point for future work down the road, you know, by us or whoever. You know, like as Ben mentioned, if this is going to be an iterative process at some point in the future, it'd be nice to take the work that we've accumulated now and distill it down so that you can use it at some point in the future.
Yeah, that sort of raises the question, Ben, do you happen to know if there will be another opportunity where this committee might be able to comment? Because we are on sort of a short timeline. We've talked about a way to very quickly put something together, but we're all spending the time looking at this and thinking about it. Is there a possible future time as the board works through this?
Maybe. I really don't. I want to hesitate. I hesitate to promise much of anything because I share everyone's frustrations with the way this particular process unfolded. It's a little bit and so I would imagine that there will be more time to dig into it. Definitely the second half, the strategies and implementation of this plan. And for more, I will continue to share with the board about this and with the committee, you with the CFF about this as we go forward and gather that feedback, Mike, directly. As far as a public feedback process, I'm not sure. I don't know.
I would think because I think we can pull together because we have a lot of common sort of big picture responses to the big picture document. But you have said that the board is going to be, you know, working more on the strategies and specific moving into implementation and things like that. And we could also potentially be helpful at that stage.
Very much so.
Leaving a pause in there in case anyone has something they want to say, especially in the room, because I can't read the room very well. Hearing nothing, I think I will call the meeting to a close unless someone raises a hand and says, please don't. And we will go ahead. Oh, Amanda raised her hand.
Yeah, I just had one quick comment maybe. Since this is a sort of an all lands, or not sort of, it is an all lands vision, there isn't much call out as far as strategies for federal lands, and there's a lot of like implicit sort of recognition, I think, throughout this document, but nothing that specifically calls it out. Like I was just looking at the climate, the climate portion, and there's a strategy around transitioning and an equitable transition to climate smart forestry, climate smart silviculture. And I think about that and it's like, well, who are you talking about? Who needs to do the transition? Where is the real threat coming from when it comes to climate? My personal and professional perspective is that there's a lot of need on federal lands. And again, kind of the onus, I can't remember if it was Eric or somebody else who mentioned, I think it was Mauricio actually, who mentioned, where the burden lies a lot of time as far as trying to meet these societal demands. And I think that recognizing it's an all lands vision, there should probably be some more call out there or recognition rather than just stating, we'll do shared stewardship or, this is an all lands plan. I don't know. I don't know what your opinion is there, Ben, but a little bit outside of the scope of this group, perhaps, but there are many small landowners that are adjacent to that specific landowner as well, who have a lot of concerns in that space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought about that too. In a way, I've thought about in the ultimate implementation will in some ways, I think, mirror the way the organizational plan of the department, right? Which recognizes those different kinds of land ownerships. Yep. Well, we've captured that thought in my notes now. And do we have any other hands raised? All right.
Are we just going to wait? Are we just going to wait for direction from Wendy then, or just, are we just going to hang tight till we hear back from you, or if you need any more help from us, or what's the plan?
I think the plan is that Heather, Miriam, and I will work on sort of consolidating the comments that we have heard at this meeting, sort of, and to a certain extent, starting with the ones that were said by a number of people and resonated with everyone, and then also sort of go down to additional comments that were made. We heard only from one or two people, that will put that into a summary document and then send it around within the next 2 days to this group for people's thoughts back on it, aiming to have something by Friday, which is a very short timeline. And I appreciate Heather Miriam saying that they're willing to do that. Does that sound okay?
And I'll send what I have done, and you can use or not use any of the additional pieces that I didn't belabor during the meeting, but they're there. So I will send them to you too, to you guys.
Okay, thank you. All right, last call, I guess. I am now adjourning the meeting, seeing no more hands. I really appreciate everyone's participation. Thanks for reading the document. And Ben, thanks so much for being here. Bye to everyone in the room too.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
You guys work so